Yeah, look, we're quite excited about this, and the market has received this really well. And the whole thing started with, our own kind of looking at even some of the people in the team and are trying to kind of send money using blockchain. We are pretty blockchain native users, we would like to say, some of us in the team. Trying to send money to another person is quite cumbersome even today for most cases, right?
This episode is brought to you by Trezor. Trezor makes beautifully crafted hardware wallets that make it easy for you to safely store your cryptocurrencies. I'm a big believer in self-custody. I've been using hardware wallets for years, and Trezor was the pioneer of hardware wallets, and they started this journey in 2013. Their hardware wallets are open source, and they support a variety of tokens, from Bitcoin to the top altcoins and even new coins such as BlackRock's BIDL. And I'm personally a user of the Trezor Safe 5. It's a beautiful device and easy to use. And Trezor offers a hand-holding service where they can help you onboard and set up your device so you can speak directly to a Trezor representative who can hold your hand through the process. And if you use the code Thinking Crypto, all one word, you can get 5% off your purchase of a Trezor device. So to learn more about Trezor and all their great devices and services, visit the link in the description. Hey folks, welcome into the Thinking Crypto podcast. I'm your host, Tony Edward, and joining me is Raj Dhamodharan, who is the Executive Vice President of Blockchain and Digital Assets at Mastercard. Raj, great to have you.
Tony, it's great to be here as well.
I am so excited to speak with you. MasterCard being the payments giant that it is, delving into blockchain and building some unique products and services. And I have a lot of questions for you. But before we get there, tell us a bit about yourself and your professional background.
Yeah, look, first of all, it's great to be here, and it's a great time to be in crypto at the moment. And I think it is also wonderful to be part of a such a celebrated brand and the company Mastercard. We have a strong history of technology-based innovations in the space, and look forward to kind of talking about that a little bit more. About myself, I've been with the company for about 15 years now, and different roles. And Mastercard is great that way in terms of building people's, pursuing people career in different sectors. I used to be in our Asia Pacific region for a while, and yeah, I have a lot longer payment background and also live in the Bay Area, so I have the obligatory startup background as well prior to all this, and which is also helping us navigate the sector because this is quite dynamic, and you got to get into it, if you will. Yeah.
Absolutely. So I often ask people, what was their first encounter with Bitcoin or crypto or blockchain, and what was the aha moment? When did it click for you?
Wow. Look, I come from a bit of a technology background, and often when new stuff comes in, whether that is crypto or AI, you tend to kind of play around with it, and that's how you get into it. First of all, first as a hobby to understand. That's the best way to understand something is to try things on. So probably my earliest thing was years ago. I can't even remember. This is probably back when I was in Asia Pacific, just trying to connect, just set up a wallet and connect to various blockchains and try to try to get into it. And that's probably one of the earliest times. I think that the critical unlock is really when the transition from the Bitcoin just as a currency into more of a programmable platform, when the chains themselves were more general purpose, more it becomes like an alternative compute method that can really people can build applications on top of it. That is, I think, is the unlock where I personally saw, wow, this has actually a lot more to it. I know the rest is history, and I'm kind of in terms of how this has opened up beyond just the core store of value, the Bitcoin story. Yeah.
Mm. Now, Raj, relative to other industries and asset classes, this technology and asset class is still very young. There's still billions of people who don't really recognize what it is and its implications. So I'm sure as some of the viewers and listeners are going to ask, so what? Why would MasterCard want to use blockchain technology and stablecoins? How would you answer to that question?
Yeah, so the answer to this actually always has almost nothing to do with specifically crypto or a blockchain for that matter. If you look at what Mastercard does, and people, most of the consumers know about because they have a card and they go use it. That card represents a abstraction or the functionality of quite a bit of complexity that is behind it. You could just, we have about 3.5 billion cards, and you could take that and go to any of the 150 million merchant locations. You can just simply with a tap and pay. And you don't decide what currency you may have a currency. You may use a debit card, you may use even a crypto card. And the other side, the merchants decide what currency that they want to get paid in. And you really don't think about it. You just go tap, it simply works. You could go to any of the countries and simply work. That complexity is all abstracted away into a simple consumer experience. And that's what people think about. And so when new forms of store of value comes in this case, we are talking about crypto, whether that is a Bitcoin or a ETH or even stable coin, simply how do you access that value to be able to spend? Anywhere that you want to spend.
Yes.
So the way that we think about it is, so yeah, as these store of value become more legitimate, it has legal standing, a regulatory standing in a given jurisdiction. We want to make sure that the power of the network is available to this new class of values as well. It is so it's all about coming to a very simple thing: is choice, right? Can people want to spend the money that they have, and we want to make sure that it's easy to do. People want to receive a specific currency they want in a given jurisdiction. We make that happen as well. So it's really about that. It's that simple. That's why we get involved in this space, because we have a obligation to curate and provide the best forms of currencies and optionality to all the people, starting with consumer payments, but it also kind of goes into other forms of payments like remittances and so on. Yeah.
Oh, for sure. And do you envision that eventually, beyond just, okay, I want to spend some Bitcoin or ETH or whichever crypto asset, that the stablecoin technology will be powering the majority of payments because of the instant settlement, the transparency, and the end consumer may not even know that's happening behind the scenes. They just need to know it works.
Look, from a consumer person to merchant payments, there is really, it works really incredibly well. As I was talking about, like, billions of consumers going to millions of merchants, and whether you tap to pay, whether you're in whether you're in New York, subway or London Tube, or online one-click checkout, it's all kind of very seamless. Now, some of the people behind the scenes may say, look, I have a bank account and I have a checking account, saving account, or some people may say, look, I have this great credit card from, we have a great credit card from, say, American Airlines credit card. It could be that, or it could be a Gemini credit card that earns Bitcoin back and rewards. Whatever that card form that you have, you could go spend at that merchant, right? Now, what we've seen is that, look, we are enabling that optionality on the consumer side. Like if you have a stablecoin wallet, you can access it through this card. And the merchants, most merchants in Western markets actually continue to prefer to get paid in local currencies. And in many markets, you're required to get paid in the local currency. So that's what the merchants need to get paid in. But in some markets, people prefer, oh no, can you pay me in stable coins? Like I don't, and they don't say that. This is very important, right, Tony? A merchant, let's say in Argentina, in another market, okay, they say that, look, I prefer to get paid in a stable coin, right? They don't say that if Tony comes with a stable coin wallet, please pay me in stable coin. They actually say, look, I want to get paid in stable coin because that's my preferred way to receive, no matter who shows up.
Hmm.
So no matter which one of those cards that I talked about shows up at that merchant location, they still get to exercise their choice of getting paid in stable. That's quite powerful, right? Now, whether, yeah, can stablecoin move faster? We actually, in our remittance business, we today settle even without stablecoins in real time, near real time. We reach 10 billion plus locations around the world. Uh, yeah, in some cases, stablecoins can help accelerate it. We can talk a little bit about the programmable nature of the money and how it can help. Um, but it is part of the answer. It's not the whole answer. You see, somebody need to still stand up the whole service.
Oh, sure. So yeah, that definitely makes sense. So you have that optionality for the consumer, but it doesn't necessarily have to power everything. Just maybe certain corridors, maybe where that could help speed up things, and having the consumer have the option that, like you said, if you're in another country, you can choose to have the stable coins.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. So look, even in the case of cross-border remittance, where stable coins people are talking about, the way that to think about this is that if you have a new store of value, new wallet, where you choose to store things in a certain format, let's say in stable coins, that choice again is independent, and somebody on the other side you want to send money to, you can't tell them, look, please open a stablecoin wallet and so that I can send money. It's kind of how absurd that looks. You
Yeah.
want to be able to send the money based on simple email or mobile number, and the other person should be able to exercise that choice. Maybe they're a bank account person. Maybe they're a telco wallet person. Maybe there is a there is a crypto wallet person on the other side. You need to be able to send the money, whatever format that you have. And that's important. So again, people talk about, oh, stablecoin. Yes, it can be a critical part of that starting of the rail, the remittance flow or the end. But you need to be able to go from fiat to stable, stable to fiat, if you truly want to deliver the choice thing. As you can see, this is a repeating theme between both use cases.
Oh, absolutely. You mentioned just a minute ago about programmable money and this technology allowing you to program these stable coins or different assets. Tell us about your view on that and how Mastercard may look to leverage that.
Yeah, look, this is the critical, this is the new feature, right? The rest are all we talked about how it need to be tied together. The power of the programmability comes in when you are able to, first of all, move this money format. In this case, we are talking about stablecoin, and being able to purchase assets on the other side. People, the industry would call it as DVP, but we can simply call it as a swap for the crypto world if you want. Uh, how do you do that in a automated way, but in also very highly assured way, meaning that the money moves only if the asset moves and if it both happens together or not. That is just one programmable primitive. I think that's quite powerful. There are other primitives, like for example, can I can I actually hold the money for a certain purpose until you meet that condition, right? How do you meet that? That condition could be that a delivery of goods somewhere, could be another real world event that is happening. All of that it allows you to express in a format that is much more transparent way, if you will. Um, and that I think is not just reserved to just stable coins. We feel the way that we think about this is that a financial institution or a consumer or a business should be able to hold the money in the format that they prefer. Sometimes it's stable coins, sometimes it could be bank deposits. So we think that even if you are in the form of a bank deposit, the classic bank deposit, you need to be able to bring that programmability and those primitives of like the DVP or conditional release of payments, all of that work seamlessly. And that's part of the reason we've been investing the tokenized deposit technology as well. And we have products and solutions there as well. And I think that is important. The reason for that is like, we stable coins are, have grown tremendously and they're going to continue to grow. There's no doubt, especially with clear regulatory clarity of the Genius and MiCA and so forth. Um, but it's also true that the fundamental economy today is continue to be driven by this fractional reserve system,
Mm.
which enables banks to take deposits, lend, and create money supply, if you will, that drives the economy. So that format will continue to exist. I haven't checked the market cap. I think we have a few hundred billion in terms of the stablecoin market cap. I think US dollar deposits alone is 14, 15 trillion, something like that in
Mm,
terms of deposits. That's just one currency. Um, so I think it is our obligation, for those of us in the crypto industry that bring the benefits to the biggest money format and regulated money format that exists, which is deposits. Um, so we've been saying this for some time as well, and because we believe in that, and so it is not like one currency versus one format versus the other, as long as it has the right attributes, which is clear parameters around how the currency works, regulatory framework, right? And we are able to offer that format in use cases in a way that's accessible to that consumer or a business base, then we are for it. And that's been driving our product strategy on this for quite some time.
mm. You mentioned the Genius Act being passed into law, pretty historic, and it has a lot of implications for
Absolutely.
payments, as well as U.S. dollar. Do you envision that innovation around stablecoins will, have an explosion? Are we going to see new issuers? And could that market hit 1 trillion by next year?
Look, I'm not very good at in predicting a crystal ball thing, and that's not what I think the trends are. The preconditions are set for people to um, build new use cases around it for sure, right? And I believe those companies that offer a end-to-end value proposition, because stablecoin at the end of it is a rail to move money,
Mm.
right? Stablecoin present in a public blockchain is a rail to move money. You build use cases when you, for that segment, consumer or a business segment, go put all the protections and the simplicity and user experience with it for you to turn into an end-to-end use case, whether that is consumer payments, which we think that cards continue to be the best way to access them, even if the format of the currency is the tables. And and as I was saying in the remittances, it is really about standing that end-to-end use case where people may have choice about where you want to send and receive. Um, yeah, I think the future is bright on that. You've also seen other jurisdictions, Tony, and we briefly mentioned MICA in Europe. So you can expect more stable coins that are euro denominated to come up. Um, Hong Kong HKMA, Hong Kong Monetary Authority, has a clear framework for stable coins as well. MAS in Singapore has a clear framework for stable coins as well. UAE is coming up with a similar one. So you can see that multiple currencies, not just US dollars, will be there. And as you can see, that in itself will start. How do you get from one to another, and all those things need to be solved. It's still not. Those are in early stages. All of this would determine the kind of the trajectory that you're on, right? So today it is actually in most markets to getting to from stable to fiat. Those markets are not as deep as fiat to fiat, which is a critical infrastructure you need to unlock in order for that to get to the next level of the growth, for it to be considered kind of a normal other form of the currency, right?
Oh, absolutely. So do you envision the future of payments? You have these different digital currencies in stablecoin format. They can be interoperable. They're on multiple blockchains, and well, many of us are going to have digital wallets. We're headed to a more digital world. We're not going to use cash, and we're going to have the optionality, like you were saying before. Maybe some corridors are the traditional rails, some are powered by stablecoins. You got digital assets and crypto, all of that in that respective wallet, and I could send international payments from my phone. I can make a payment at Starbucks, and all these things are done in that wallet.
Yeah, so most a lot of these experiences that you're talking about happens today, right? So you could you could have your um, Apple Wallet or a bank wallet or if you're an Android, there are many options there as well. People can go pay today. I think that experience is well done already. And the optionality that need to be added is those purses, those new stablecoin wallets that are coming out. can be equally accessed easily. And so we have many such cards, right? For example,
Mm.
I have card Gemini is the credit card that earns crypto rewards. We have a card with crypto.com in Middle East, Kraken in Europe, for example, even the MetaMask and the
Yeah.
self-custody wallet have a Mastercard card attached to it. So you go through a KYC process. You can bring your funds, whatever the assets are, and the card starts working as simple as your any other card. The kind of power that it puts in the consumer is quite significant, and that's what we are excited about to bridge the world of the crypto to the kind of the 150 million merchant acceptance locations and growing, I should say, to those consumers.
Mm. Now, tell us a bit about which stablecoins you're using, because I noticed that Mastercard had joined the USDG Stablecoin Consortium, the Global Dollar Network Consortium, excuse me. Um, are you primarily using USDG, or are you kind of agnostic? We're using USDC and other stablecoins as well.
Yeah, look, we support multiple stable coins in many of our use cases today. Consumers, not consumers, the business, the financial institutions that issue cards or the acquirers that connect merchants can actually settle with through our partners in multiple stable coins. We've been supporting USDC for the longest time now, and USDP, which was a Paxos stable coin. What you saw us announcing last couple of weeks ago is that we are adding few more coins support. That includes the PayPal USD, USDG. I'll come to the USDG discussion in a bit. And Phi USD as well, because Fiserv announced their plans to launch one. What you're seeing there is that as long as the coin is well formed, conform to a certain regulatory jurisdictions where they operate in, we want to be able to make that available in our network, which is not very different from how our traditional network works. 150 plus currencies are supported in our network,
Mm.
several of them as settlement as well. So it's natural for us to add support to those currencies. With USDG, you asked an earlier question, like, are everybody wanting to launch coin? Look, I think there is an upper limit to the number of coins that would you can play a useful role in driving some of these use cases, because each, look, you made this point earlier, each of the stable coin, if you look at it, you got to issue them, manage them, make them available in multiple blockchain networks,
Mm.
list them in multiple exchanges, create deep liquidity between that pair and the other pairs. It is actually a hard work, and we think that the market would converge to a few stable coins in the world. We're not here to pick winners. What we wanted to do here really is, with the USDG joining with Paxos, to provide the option for a financial institution or a fintech want to offer this to their consumers. They should have an easy way to do so.
Mm.
What we're hoping is we can provide that access, and we already are in the on and off ramp between the fiat and the stablecoin world, and we think we can continue to play a very effective role there in partnership with Paxos. So we're making it easy for them to access, and that's the part of it. And I think that helps people kind of uh, uh, use that coin and build scale around one or two, if you will. And we'll continue to support other coins as well. As I was saying before, this is more of an access mechanism, easy access mechanism for financial institutions.
Yeah, and you definitely your point of, there's going to be some consolidation because there's going to be so many stable coins and issuers. But look, that's part of markets and innovation. But there's probably just going to be a handful of winners. But I love that you guys are not picking winners or losers, and you're being agnostic and supporting the respective stable coins as long as everything is copacetic.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's correct. That's correct. Yeah.
Um, Now, Mastercard has a lot on its plate when it comes to crypto, and you touched on quite a few of them. I wanted to go through Crypto Credential because that one really fascinates me. Where building the technology where I can just give you let's say like an email address, so to speak, or a username, and then you can send me any form of payment.
Yeah, look, it's we're quite excited about this, and the market has received this really well. And the whole thing started with, our own kind of looking at even some of the people in the team and are trying to kind of send money using blockchain. We are pretty blockchain native users, we would like to say, some of us in the team. Trying to send money to another person is quite cumbersome even today for most cases, right? Let's since we're kind of going behind the covers here a little bit, what does it take? You got if I need to send you $10, I had to ask you kind of, Tony, can you text me your blockchain address?
Yeah.
And you may text me, and let's say even I know how to use it. And in this case, I may know, but a common consumer, they have to go cut and paste to where? Okay, I go to a wallet and I send it. Okay, I have Sol. Can you receive Sol? I have USDC, and you prefer USDG. Are you on? Is your wallet provider connected to the right chains? There is so much complexity,
Yeah.
right? I'm just scratching the surface. And how do let's say I'm with a crypto wallet, and how do they know that your wallet provider is a compliant one?
Mm.
uh, is what jurisdiction you are in. Are you a KYC person? How do I prove that I'm actually facilitating a travel rule compliant transaction? So much of this, we said, look, it's very simple. If you look at how the experience is, in this case, let's replay the experience. And I would say, Tony, I would like to send $10. And you would basically, we already know each other's mobile number or email, and I'll go plug that in and immediately my wallet provider will have information about who's your wallet provider, what kind of assets that you can receive safely, what kind of assets, what level of KYC that you've passed, and all of that information is available behind the scenes, and so that the experience is so simple. You just enter the email, it immediately kind of verifies you just done, right?
Mm.
uh, so that I think is quite resonating quite well. What we've also announced last couple of weeks ago is that kind of a simple alias-based experience, which is pure crypto to crypto, is already live and in the marketplace for us with the crypto credential that you refer to. But we also have a classic remittance business uh, that was originally fiat to fiat, where now we can enable stablecoin wallets to send money to each other as well. So that functionality and this alias is coming together. So the beauty of that is that, look, you could start with, you could, in this case, you could have a bank account and the experience would still be the same. I will send money to this mobile number, so to speak, Tony's mobile number. And you could have made the choice to say, look, I would actually receive the money in the bank account. And you may be in, let's say, Philippines, and I'm in US or vice versa. That kind of simple user experience is all possible now. And because we are able to move the money behind the scenes, even one leg is crypto and the other leg is fiat, right? And that comes together with a simple consumer experience. We're quite excited about combining our money movement thing with this, and because that's what I think consumers want, and that's what the businesses who are actually opening up this remittance use case want. Um, Look, everyone wants to be compliant and do the right thing, but it's got to be easy to do so. It got to be easy to do so for the with the right tools and services, which is why we are quite excited about this combination.
Absolutely. I'm excited for that too because over the years, I've just seen so much friction in people trying to move funds, to your point of sending wallet addresses and things like that. And I feel like what you guys are building is such a critical part of the infrastructure for mass adoption. I think of people who are not as technical and who are scared of the long wallet addresses, right? And and all those things. And just being able to make it feel like Web 2, so to speak, but it's Web 3 tech. It's all done behind the scenes, interoperable. You can swap out between crypto assets, traditional currencies, and much more. And it's just easy. It just
Yeah.
works.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think it is the market expectation or the consumer expectation is unreasonable here. They're simply asking that, can I bring the form of the wallet or the bank account and the currency preference, and you bring yours, and can we just simply transact and be compliant at the same time? It's not a big expectation if you ask me, and it's the industry's obligation to deliver it, and we are happy to help in that process. Yeah.
Mm. Tell us about the multi-token network, or I don't know if you already touched on that earlier with some of the details we were discussing.
Yeah, look, the multi-token network is the proposition that we came up with a few years ago, where we said, look, we got to make this programmable money work for deposits too, right? And part of that is because of how regulated that money is, and that is already available in abundance, and it is and in every market, right? What was missing was, how do you bring this level of immediacy of payments, and, how fast the money moves, how fast the money settles, and the programmability to it. So that's what we've done there. We've started working with some of the largest banks, including JPM, in this topic. They've been tremendous innovators in the marketplace as well. They've led pretty much the whole industry from a financial institution perspective in taking steps, and we're very glad to partner with them. And end of the day, what that means is that a business or a consumer with a bank account able to participate in some of the tokenized real world assets, which is a growing space. This is the next cycle of growth for the crypto industry, I feel, that's coming up in terms of the new assets coming onto the chain. So if new assets come onto the chain, the commerce will follow. And you need a money format that addresses everybody's needs. And that's been our bet, and market is clearly, you may have seen, Bank of England recently made pretty public remarks about how they are very pro tokenized deposits are. You've seen some of the largest financial institutions and come out and say there's the same thing. We think that this kind of format is here to stay. But the key is, a buyer may want to start with a bank account. Tony, you may start to see the theme repeating itself. The seller of something may want to receive in stable coins. All of that need to work. That's for the industry like us to figure out how to make that simple to work. And the solution is just that. If you look at our a consumer or the business experience of how multi-token network works, simply you connect your bank account to it, and you can go to any of the tokenized asset marketplaces, and you buy it just like anything else that you buy. But in this case, behind the scenes, programmable money is created, a settlement is happening. This is all a bit of inside the system in terms of how it works. But the idea is to make it very, very simple from end user perspective, no matter the kind of format of the money you have. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned partnering with JP Morgan. Does this technology allow these different institutions, Mastercard and banks and much more, to have a more trusted partnership? Obviously, there's been partnerships set up historically. You look at the SWIFT system and the movement of money and the messaging system, but with blockchain, I can trust these different intermediaries and different folks much better. It's all real time. It's all transparent.
Yeah, yeah. Look, it's the way that the short answer to your question is does blockchain help make this possible more easily? Absolutely, yes. But it reminds what is also true is that you got to have a common interoperable standards in terms of how these things are set up. And you really need to know that, okay, the other person, the person with the other side of the wallet, or the buyer or the seller in this case, who's the person, what KYC levels have gone through,
Mm,
how do you send money to them, and how does it get settled? All of that interoperability need to be set up by some third party. Having provided interoperable solutions between financial institutions for consumers and merchants for decades, and we think we have a role to play. So, if there's, for example, in the case, the JPM example that you gave, the other bank, if we send a tokenized deposit from one bank to another bank, somebody need to make sure that that can be settled. Somebody need to make sure that it is going to the right person, and it is the standards of how one token interoperates with other. We think we have a role to play as well. So it's really, yes, it's decentralized blockchain technology, but at the same time, it requires people kind of setting the standards. It's not very different from how internet has evolved, Tony, if you think about it, right? Internet is a decentralized network. Almost all the companies that have built businesses on top of them is using that as an infrastructure to build solutions on top that they couldn't do before, but they're all centralized companies. I think what you're seeing here is the same thing play out, right? Some of the largest exchanges are corporations, right? So
mm,
providing solutions, and they've been able to build scale. An example, it's like Coinbase and Crypto.com and so on. So they're able to build scale because they are able to organize around, use the technology, but simplify it, make it accessible for everyone.
Do you believe in order to set up that standard for interoperability, these the banks, some of the other TradFi institutions, and some of the native crypto companies need to form some sort of association, develop a standard. The government also has a buy-in because payments will probably have to go in and out of the government in these formats, and that's kind of how it gets going.
You see that already happening, right? So there are a lot of standards emerging, and we are helping. For example, crypto credential is we are offering that as a framework for how
Mm,
the use case that we used in the crypto credential example is a remittance use case, but that framework actually applies throughout. It could be a B2B payment. The obligations on the buyers and seller side are different in that case compared to a classic remittance transaction. The rules may be different. The participation requirements may be different. The regulations may be different, but that framework applies. And we think that's a scalable approach to opening up other use cases on chain as well. In fact, our multi-token network, we use a version of our that technology for enabling buyers and sellers, right? Yeah, standardization is I think, and interoperability is quite important for this to scale. Look, you're going to see multiple coins come up, right? You're
sure.
going to see multiple form of currencies come up, and yeah, you can't expect this to kind of self regulate, if you will, in terms of how this interoperability works. You need somebody to kind of stand up a service that makes sure that it indeed happens under a common approach. And
Mm,
if it touches consumers' user experience, how do you standardize that?
mm,
That's quite important too. Right?
absolutely. I'm curious as to which blockchains you're building on. I think you touched on some of it. Obviously, you're agnostic when it comes to stable coins. But as far as your systems, which blockchains are primarily powering it? I think I read Ondo and maybe Ethereum and things like that. Maybe you can give some clarity there.
Yeah, so we started out in earliest days, EVM compatible chains is how we started because that kind of provides the maximum scale. Some are, obviously the mainnet, but also the L2s and side chains and so on that gives compatibility. We are again here very agnostic, where we will go wherever the commerce activity happens.
Sure.
right? And in some ways, this multiple chains are makes transactions a bit more harder to make it work because you could have money in one chain, the asset in another chain, and again, somebody need to provide the assurance that the transaction will go through. That's part of what we do, and yeah, we are again chain agnostic. We'll go where the assets are, and the reason we go where the assets are is because that's where the commerce happens, and that's where the need for a payment experience need to be there. And we are open to supporting all chains. In fact, we work with a number of them at the moment. Some of them, I should say, it's that there are some, especially in institutional use cases, you would also find some chains that are private and are semi-public or permissioned, whatever the grade of openness that you want to put a term to. Yeah.
So speaking of permission and public blockchains, do you think we're going to see a mix of that? Let's say like you and the folks at Mastercard may have certain transactions, certain things you want on a permission blockchain, but some on the public. Same thing for JP Morgan, these banks, right? Because or you use the public and you have ZK or zero knowledge proofs as part of a way to hide the information or keep it.
Yeah, look, I think this privacy is going to be quite important. There are certain class of transactions that are kind of net transactions. Maybe it's okay to go public in the public chains. Um, and I think now the safety soundness as the people in the industry would say is coming up and getting better in the public chains, and they're becoming more resilient. And there's a healthy competition happening, which is great. But I think there would be a class of transactions that would maybe look. End of the day, why this public-private chain debate comes in is very simple, right? It's all about, do you have all the people who need it in the ecosystem participating in that chain?
Mm.
If not, there is inefficiency created. So if there are certain ecosystem where institutions can come together and say, for this class of transactions, we would rather keep it, we'd still want it programmable. We still want it interoperable. We still want it kind of sufficiently decentralized so that we can all use it as a common infrastructure. But I don't necessarily feel that unless you have a B2B agreement between two institutions, there is no reason to put this in the public chain.
Mm.
There will be certain class, but I think I'm a big believer in the public chains. The reason for this is that that's where the open innovation happens. Anybody could go build an app, and any currency provider in a ERC20, using the EVM example, the standard or the derivatives, there are quite a few derivatives on that as well, provide the programmability. What is programmability? Is being able to deal with this multiple currencies in a simple way, and an application or a smart contract in that case is what I call as an app, can take advantage of this currency formats. I think that kind of Lego block like building is essential to building scale, and so therefore public chains are here to stay. And I think that would continue to be the primary hotbed for innovation in the space, and we're committed to providing solutions there.
I don't know if this makes sense and if it's a question you can answer because it just came to mind and it's maybe a bit left field from what you guys are doing. Obviously, you're dealing with consumers and enabling better payments and different options, but also with this technology of blockchain, I feel like eventually our data, like my information, can be on the blockchain encrypted, and I can feel free to release it to different brands and companies, like Mastercard, right? And maybe this will help prevent data breaches and things we've experienced over the past few decades. Do you think it makes sense eventually that our information will be on the blockchain and tied in with our payments and digital identity?
So digital identity, just taking on that first, I think it is the blockchain can uh, potentially play a big role in this. For us, we've taken the practical approach of trying to, so because identity is a very, very loaded topic, right? It comes because a government gives you an identity,
Yeah.
and They are the primary issuer of the identity in most jurisdiction. So we think all the regulated activity need to somehow tie so therefore the KYC process need to be tied to that government ID. What we preferred, at least the way that we've approached in Crypto Credential, is that I would rather focus on use cases that your this identity or this wallet is enabled for, and if you've gone through the sufficient checks or the KYC process by somebody who has the obligation to do the KYC for you can complete.
Mm,
That's quite important, and they have an economic reason to do so
mm,
because the issue with the kind of the notions of self-sovereign identity and so on is that it lacks kind of the overall commercial incentive and tie back to that government ID, which is essential for corporations who are regulated in a jurisdiction to provide services to you.
mm,
So we rather kind of take the approach, it's a bit nuanced, but what I'm trying to say is that we'd rather take the approach of saying, look, in order for you to send a remittance transaction in this jurisdiction, here are the KYC requirements, here are the travel rule requirements.
mm,
And by the way, this company, it could be an exchange, could be a bank, has taken on the obligation to KYC you to meet that obligation. And Crypto Credential will provide a proof of that on chain that Tony has gone through this in US according to these requirements by this wallet provider, and they stand behind Tony.
mm,
Now Tony can go send money, and this person, this banker who did the KYC, stands behind that transaction. So this is a more a use case focused view of the identity, which is a very practical way that we're moving forward. I'm not opposed to this evolving to some an identity, a kind of a pure form of an identity, but that remains to be seen. We've taken the practical approach of, what activity you want to enable with that identity, who stands behind that identity for that use case in order to enable. So I think that's the practical approach that we've taken, and it seemed to resonate in the market because people are trying to do the same. Yeah.
mm. Yeah, that definitely makes sense. We touched on the Genius Act and what the implications that is will have for the stablecoin market and the ability to use stablecoins. But we have the Clarity Act, which is the market structure bill. White House crypto czar David Sachs said that's going to be voted on late September or early October in the Senate, and then possibly be signed into law. What implications does that have for Mastercard as a business in dealing with different crypto assets? Because that bill will, give some clarity on security, not security, kind of the swim lanes, essentially.
Yeah, so look, the details are still being worked through. It remains to be seen. But from our perspective, today consumers can buy and sell crypto assets using our cards and many exchanges where they accept Mastercard, which we hope to continue to support, make it easy for consumers to exercise their choice there. That is the primary way that we will engage with other assets, non-payment like currencies, but other assets. People can buy their Bitcoin, if you will, today, and we hope that that will continue. But the rest of the nuances of the various things, we have to see what the implications are. And we are focused on making sure that the simple payment experience is enabled for all those consumers and continue to be there. Is our primary focus there.
Raj, I wish we had another hour, but I know we're coming up in time, and I got some wrap-up questions here for you. First, if you could create your own metaverse, what would the theme be?
Wow. Look, yeah, this is a tough one, and look, we've experimented some early on about how our brand can engage with the metaverse, and how, as people come and visit our brand experience, and we've seen some early engagement there. But I think this as a format is. I think we need to put all the brands need to put more thought into it. As in, what is something that unique experience that you can provide there that is distinct from the real world experience. So we have some lessons learned from that, and we look to re-engage the market as this thing evolves. But end of the day, I think it need to provide something really unique.
Absolutely. Rapid fire questions. Favorite food.
Favorite food? Yeah, seafood is the favorite food any time of the day.
Favorite musician or band.
Look, I come from South India, so there's a famous musician called Ilayaraja. There's has a lot of Tamil songs, and that I keep going back to those. Whatever you grew up with, right?
Sorry, I didn't catch.
Whatever you grew up with in
Oh,
your, yeah, yeah,
yeah, you have a special affinity, a special place in your heart, right?
that's right.
Yeah. Favorite movie.
Wow. Um, I'll say favorite genre. I would say a lot of this the movies that tie the history to real life, and many movies that are taken with a historical fiction in mind, is the genre that I keep going to.
Mm. Favorite book.
Um, Again, I would go into a lot of fiction, historical fiction. That's the genre I'll keep going to.
And when you're not working at Mastercard, what are you doing for fun?
Oh, look, I live in the Bay Area, so running and biking is favorite, and we hike as a family as well, and we recently hiked Everest Base Camp, which we are quite excited about, and I hope to continue to go into other hiking journeys. With the Bay Area, it's very easy to get into the trails. You should when you visit here next time, we should take a hike.
Absolutely. Raj, absolute pleasure. I love what MasterCard is doing with blockchain and crypto and stable coins. And I love the credential because I feel like that's just a major pillar that's needed for adoption. And I would love to have you back on in the future, but thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me. It's been a great discussion, and look forward to seeing you in real life at some point.